If you could grab, if you need to grab a cup of coffee, that's great, or a snack, that would be wonderful. But we're going to start right now. I will welcome all of those who are joining us on live stream. And many thanks to Stephanie for help coordinating the live stream. It was fun walking in here talking with, I saw Marta, and she said there's more light in here than normal, and that's not just because there's so many more people in here, but there's actually more light if you look over by the windows. I don't know if you've noticed it. And many thanks to Dan. Where's Dan? Oh, Dan in the back to helping coordinate that, and all the painting and the whole team here, the facilities group at TBE. This is really fun for me. One of the things I've liked most about being a rabbi in Madison over the last 18 months is the really remarkable relationships between the other Jewish institutions in town. How nice it is that we feel the need and the importance of supporting one another in a small Jewish town. And I think no place does that happen more than Jewish Social Services of Madison. With a deep-rooted history of serving the local community, with compassion and dedication, building an ongoing legacy of support and care for individuals and families in need. For decades, JSS has been the leader in the Madison community, providing vital resources, including social services, refugee resettlement, senior programs, mental health support, and more. And in today's increasingly challenging and increasingly complex environment, the work of JSS is more essential than ever, helping to ensure the well-being of vulnerable populations through a combination of advocacy, direct service, and community engagement. We are proud to be longtime collaborators, and I use that word in a positive sense, with JSS and value the deep relationships that our communities have together. It's one of the great strengths of the Jewish Madison. We're joined today by two staff members of JSS. I saw Paul. Where's Paul? Paul's over here. And the newest staff member of JSS is their new executive director, Monica Nolan, who's right here. The first time I met Monica, I invited her to speak at Bethel. I figured if I invite her the very first time I meet her, she can't say no. So Monica's actually going to be giving a sermon at Bethel, I think in early May, as part of, once she gets a little bit of her sea legs as executive director of JSS. But we just are so excited to have Monica and to figure out new ways to build this ongoing and really important partnership. Are there JSS board members here? If you want to stand up, our JSS board members. And has anybody, my hunch is yes, who here has worked at JSS in some capacity? All right, so how amazing the connections. So, the Blockstein Memorial Lecture is a cornerstone event that furthers that mission that JSS aspires to by bringing distinguished speakers to the Madison community, or already part of the Madison community, to share insights on key social issues. Established in memory of Liesl Blockstein, a passionate advocate for social justice and lifelong supporter of JSS. The lecture honors her legacy by addressing topics of justice, equity, and service, and by honoring a woman in the state that embodies these qualities. Rooted in a commitment to education and dialogue, it fosters conversation and inspires action that strengthens the community as a whole. And with that in mind, it is great fun to be here with TBE member, Dr. Susan Davidson. She has devoted her career to improving the perinatal outcomes for mothers and their children. After completing her training at residency at Albert Einstein, I knew, I just love New Yorkers so much. She came to Wisconsin to complete her fellowship in 1986 and has been a dedicated Badger ever since. Susan and her husband Richie have been at Temple Beth El members since 1988. And as much as we love Richie, I think the thing she's most happy to come in here is that she has 2 grandchildren who are currently running these halls right now. Solly and Aviva and her daughter Amelie and her daughter-in-law Denny are here someplace. Where are they? They're chasing the children. So, yeah. So let's all give a big clap for Dr. Davidson.
Okay, well, I can't say how honored I am to be here. Honored to be with all of you. I'm honored to give the Blockstein lecture and to be part of this lineage of mostly women activists who, can you hear?
No, I said all women. Blockstein lecture.
All women. Okay, of women. Of women activists, some of whom are here today. So I hope you'll hang with me. It could be a little geeky, so just hang in there. So I am Susan Davidson. I'm a doctor who specializes in maternal fetal medicine. That means high-risk obstetrics. So I took care of twins, triplets, women with medical problems. I did a lot of ultrasound. So I was going to subtitle this talk, How a Nice Jewish Girl from Brooklyn Wound Up Testifying Before the Natural Resources Board on the Perils of Eating Venison Shot with Lead. But I decided too much to put on the slide, so I'm just going to tell you the story about how that happened. So this is my email, very easy to remember, susanrdavidson@gmail. And if you have questions or you want some of my slides, because I'm going to go, there's too much stuff on here. I'm very attached to my slides, so I didn't take out enough. But if you want any more information, please contact me. Oh, okay. Disclaimer. The next slide is a little bit shocking. So if you're squeamish, close your eyes for a minute. So this is a baby very similar to babies I delivered. And this baby has a condition called gastroschisis. And what it is there's a hole in the abdomen right here, to the right of the umbilical cord. And the bowel, instead of being inside the body where it's supposed to be, is free-floating in the amniotic fluid. So this condition is one thing is it's unmistakable for anything else. Like you can diagnose it, and there isn't like a little bit of it or a lot of it or a borderline thing. This is what it is. So when I was training, I did medical school and residency in the Bronx at Albert Einstein. To my knowledge, we had one case of this. And we were so flummoxed, we didn't know what to do, so we hospitalized the mother because we're like, what about him? We don't know. When I got to Madison, I did a lot of ultrasound, and my referral area, I was at a system where they had a lot of patients from the southwestern wedge of Wisconsin, so down to the Illinois border, over to Iowa, that whole sort of southwest corner. And so I got a lot of referrals from there. And I was seeing a lot of this. And by a lot, I mean maybe I would have 2 or 3 in my practice at all times. And every time we would get a new pediatric surgeon, they would have trained in Hopkins, or they would have trained in Boston or Pittsburgh, and they would come to Madison, they go, wow, I'm doing a lot of these operations. This is really weird. So I started saying, what is this? And I was a city kid. I knew nothing. I said I was nature impaired. I was like, oh, must be something in the water. I mean, little did I know. And these were patients from Dodgeville, Platteville. So then this paper came out. This is 2010. And what this showed was that the closer you lived, and this is done in the Yakima Valley in Washington State, the Central Valley that's flat and very agricultural. The closer you lived to a center of atrazine exposure, the more likely you were to have a baby with this. I'm like, oh, wow, there's something to this. Not only that, if you are conception occurs in the spring, during the wet season, you're also more likely to have a baby with this. And this has been found in Indiana and other states, and I just, like yesterday, came across my email paper from 2024 showing the same thing. So then the next thing that happened is I read this book. Now, this book is by Sandra Steingraber. She's an ecologist and a journalist. And this book is not about religion. It's about faith as her child. Faith who is, and we have it, Anne has a copy right here. Now, the interesting thing, and so this book is all about the environment and pregnancy. Interesting thing about Sandra Steingraber is that she had bladder cancer at the age of 26. Her father had bladder cancer. Her uncle had bladder cancer. She is adopted. So she grew up in southern Illinois, and turns out that she lived downstream from a dry cleaning plant. And so all the chemicals in the dry cleaning plant got into their water supply. So she wrote another book called Living Downstream, and so she became really my idol. So this is what the rest of the talk is more or less about. How the first 9 months shape the rest of your life, and they mean your first 9 months in utero. So this is why I'm very proud to have been an obstetrician. I think, not only are we making good babies, we're making good citizens for the future. Okay, so now we get to sort of the meat of things. Okay, who are we at birth? We are the result of very complex things. We have our genetic endowment. We have our maternal environmental exposures and what happens. We have our maternal nutrition, what the mother eats, and what health state that she's in. And then stress levels can certainly affect perinatal outcomes. And even, Rich and I discuss this a lot, even twins in utero are not in the same environment. One gets a better piece of the placenta, gets more placenta than the other. One piece of the placenta is located in a better neighborhood than the other. So, we come into this world already loaded. And then this is the obstetrician's view of karma. So we come in, we have our genetics and our intrauterine environment, and as we go through life, this interacts with our psychosocial and physical environments, and then all this affects our own pregnancies, and we pass it on to our children. So the sort of concept of l'ador vador is going to come up over and over again in this talk, because it really is this cyclic nature of life. So there are very special periods when we're sensitive to environmental toxins. And this is mostly when cells are dividing rapidly. So, of course, fetal and neonatal life, we are very vulnerable. And I always think of it, it's like, somebody gave me this analogy, it's like a rosebud. Like if there's a frost when the buds are forming, it's a very, very sensitive period, all through childhood. And, for our purposes, fetal life and childhood is pretty continuous. And I said just for our purposes, just right now. Puberty is a time of great cell division and pregnancy. And we're exposed to the soup of chemicals, which we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about. But how are we exposed to these things? Well, first of all, we breathe them. And we all know what it is to breathe soot and bad air. And Rich and I were in Delhi when the air quality index was 400. It was very scary, very frightening. Children breathe more rapidly than adults, so it affects them more. And pregnant women breathe more rapidly. So whatever environmental pollutants are out there, this population is particularly vulnerable. We eat things. And interesting, children actually eat more food per pound, and they actually drink more water per pound. So not only are their cells are rapidly dividing and growing, they're also eating a lot. We have new kittens in our life, and we're sitting and watching them eat a lot. The Zomley's kittens. Also, and I want you to think about this, children live in a different world than we do. We just think they're like small adults, but they live close to the ground. What they're seeing is our knees and our thighs. They're interacting with the earth all the time. They're crawling around, they're falling, playing sports. They live in a very different environment. So anything that's on the ground, we have to assume that goes in the mouth. And same thing with skin contact. We're exposed to toxins through our skin, and kids have a bigger surface area of skin relative to their weight than adults do. And you can see they have these nice big heads, makes us love them. So they have a bigger surface area, and they spend their time on the ground, so they're very vulnerable to these toxins. And finally, there's transplacental transfer and breast milk, which we're going to talk about. But we used to think that the placenta, when I was in medical school even, we learned that the placenta, remember the placenta is what feeds the baby, and it's the interaction between the fetus and the rest of the world. And we were taught that the placenta protects the fetus, and it sort of strains out toxins. Not true. Whatever's in the mother is in the fetus. So what are we exposed to? So this is a story. This is a graph of 54 pregnant women, and they looked for cotinine, which is a cigarette byproduct, all sorts of heavy metals, pesticides, flame retardants, plasticizers, and every single person in this study had almost all of these, or at least most of them. So all the mothers had it. And then this is what was in the fetus, all these things. And very few of them are banned. We're going to talk a little bit later about how we're protected, but the preview, we're not. So somebody once said, well, and then so they did another study where they looked at newborns, and you can test newborns very easily. You can collect the umbilical cord blood at birth, and that blood belongs to the baby. But it's nice because the baby's already separated from the placenta, so you can get this blood and know what's actually in the baby, and it doesn't harm the baby in any way. So they looked at umbilical cord blood for 413 chemicals. They detected, on the average, 200, and these included all sorts of carcinogens and developmental toxins, accounting for low birth weight, birth defects, impaired neurodevelopment. And a theme we're going to come back to a lot is that we know nothing about combinations of toxins. And we don't live in a simple univariate environment, as you know. Our environments are very rich. So we know very little about the interactions of toxins with each other. Okay, so this is one of the geeky obstetrician slides. And what this shows is different parts, like when different parts of the fetus are actually developing. So if you have an exposure, say at 7 weeks, heart defects can come along. What I really want to point out is the top one, which is the central nervous system, which develops all through pregnancy and all through childhood, and as Richie will tell you, all through all of our lives, we're always having neurogenesis and synaptogenesis. So whatever's happening in utero that affects our nervous system goes through our whole life. So here's the synaptic density over time. These are the connections that our various nerves make with each other. And you can see in newborns, it's much more sparse, and then as development happens, the synapses get more and more complex and organized. So what this says is that we are susceptible to neurotoxins throughout our whole lives, but especially in fetal life and in early childhood. Okay, now, I'll tell you, our understanding of toxins is very limited for a whole variety of reasons. It's really, really hard to study. So one issue is that it's hard to study because there's a long latency between exposure in utero and what happens later on. So for example, there's very good evidence that susceptibility to breast cancer is most acute during in utero development, during fetal development. But the breast cancer doesn't happen until way later. So if you're an assistant professor, how are you going to study this? You're not going to have your tenure based on this. So it's very, very hard to study because there's such a long latency. Second, as I told you, all the different routes we are exposed through, and so we're exposed to many chemicals through all these different routes. And we have no idea how they interact. And then other factors, we talked about what our state is when we come into this world. And we all come in with different susceptibilities, with different other exposures, with different health risks, particularly with different psychosocial risks, and chronic stress makes us much more susceptible. Poor nutrition makes us much more susceptible to these kinds of toxins. So you can throw eggs later, but I think that animal research is very important in this because it's the only way we're going to find out anything truthfully. And we can have another panel and discuss ethical treatment of animals, et cetera. Okay, so what is safe? Safe thresholds in biology are very difficult to determine. One thing is you only know by the question you ask. So if you don't ask, is this associated with autism, you'll never know. So you only have the information on what you've actually asked, and it's hard to ask every single question. Second, the effects are not linear. So for example, a high dose of radiation will kill cells, but a low dose can cause a mutation. So, they say that the dose makes the poison, but not true. Because the doses aren't always linear and predictable in the ways that we think in a straight line, which is very convenient to think in a straight line, but it's not always useful. Okay, the other thing we know is that more things are studied, the more the, quote, safe threshold falls. So this is lead. This is what's considered the safe threshold for lead. So back, not so long ago, 50 to 70, it was considered, a safe threshold in children was considered 60. We would consider that acutely lead poison now. And we'd be in the home looking for all the sources. I mean, pediatrician friends are nodding. And so then it went down to 30, then it went down to 25, then it went, and that's not actually true. And now it's 3.5, but the CDC statement is there is no safe level of lead. Lead is not supposed to be in our body, and there is no safe level. And I don't think we have one. It's really interesting. If you look at the Wisconsin flag, at the very bottom is a miner with a pickaxe. That's a lead miner. So yeah, we have it as part of our tradition. I'll also say for a second, I can go to the next one. Some of the biggest challenges to environmental exposures in Wisconsin are lead, nitrates, and mercury. Now, lead is not such a problem for Madison because in the early 2000s, we were the first major city to take out the lead service lines. So from the main water going into the house, there were grants to replace there's still some in Madison. Most exposure comes from paint chips and things like that now. And there's private cars do not use lead, but planes do, and especially private planes. So those of you who live in Middleton, there's a little bit of activity around the Middleton airport, concern for all the lead in the planes. Nitrates are a problem in Wisconsin, a big problem, not so much in Madison because we have municipal water. Mercury is a topic for another time, but I will say there's for those of you who fish, there's a really great website called Choose Wisely from Wisconsin Division of Health, and you can easily get that. So we're going to spend our time talking about plasticizers and other endocrine disruptors and PFAS. Okay, endocrine disruptors. So what are hormones? So endocrine disruptors are things that disrupt our hormones. So what are hormones? Hormones are messengers that can travel throughout the body, and they tell our cells basically how to behave. So common hormones are thyroid hormones, all the sex hormones, testosterone, estrogen. Insulin is a hormone, controls our blood sugar. Cortisol that keeps us going and fight or flight kinds of things. And many other hormones. So endocrine disruptors are substances that act like hormones. So what they do are they either fool the body into thinking that this is the hormone, so it causes decreased hormonal activity, or sometimes they act just like the hormone and causes increased activity. And for our conversation, one of the big things is that they're often, the endocrine disruptors are often estrogenizers. So they feminize things often, but sometimes they're anti-estrogen, and sometimes they act like androgens, which are like male things, and testosterone. So we're gonna spend a lot of time talking about endocrine disruptors. And there's many known endocrine disruptors, plasticizers, and we're gonna talk about BPA and phthalates, PFAS, which, as you know, if you read the paper, we have an issue, especially on the east side of Madison, in Starkweather Creek, from the firefighting foam at the airport. Also, all throughout Wisconsin. Flame retardants, heavy metals like arsenic and mercury, pesticides, and many other substances act as endocrine disruptors. And some of you might remember DES, which was given to, in our generation, it was a big thing. It was given to prevent miscarriage, and then it turned out to cause malformations in the female and male offspring. So plasticizers. Oh, I want to say a little, oh no, we're good. Okay, so we're going to talk about BPA and phthalates, and we're going to mostly talk about them as a group. You might have heard of, so these are plasticizers, and plastic is a big deal in terms of environmental hazards, and we can't even go into all of them now. But what's important to know is the rate of plastic production in the United States has soared and will soar astronomically. So we're not getting better on that, we're getting way worse. Interestingly, plastic production has gone up as our use of fossil fuels for fuel is going down. So the 6 biggest plastic companies are owned by fossil fuel companies. So you have all this product and you kind of have to figure out what you're going to do with it next. So you can make plastic. And all of us have had the experience of buying like a pair of shears or something, and it's in this huge bubble thing that you need a pair of shears to open, and then you cut your hand open, et cetera. So we have created this just enormous appetite for plastics. So we're going to talk a little bit about BPA. So it's a substance that is often used as a lining for things. It makes plastic soft. It's also used as food and beverage lining on thermal receipts. It's that shiny stuff. It's used in flame retardants, bottle caps. We absorb BPA. We both eat it, but we also absorb it from our mucous membranes, dermal, and from the GI tract as well. And tons of this is produced annually. It's got a recycling logo of number 7, which means it does not get recycled. As we're going to say over and over, only 10% of what you think is going to be recycled is not, and that's if you're really good about doing the recycling thing. So this is an example of the shiny stuff on the lining of cans is BPA. So BPA is banned in infant bottles and things like that, but there's a lot of what they call regrettable substitutions, and that is you just change the side chain, and I'm sorry, Gil, our chemist, is not here, Gil Nathanson, but you change the side chain and it's something else, it's BPS. You know, and there's many, many of these changes. What that means is it's usually something that's not as well studied and is equally toxic. So our exposure, as I said, to BPA is massive, and this is a picture of somebody putting Purell hand sanitizer on like you would at Trader Joe's, actually, they say they went away from BPA, and then handling a receipt, and all the shiny stuff came off on the hand to be absorbed. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about phthalates, which is another plasticizer used to make plastic sort of malleable, and this is everywhere. And these are unstable molecules, so they actually jump off the surface and come to your nose, and you breathe them. New car smell, what's that? You walk into Bed Bath & Beyond, not Bed Bath & Beyond, Bath & Body Works, and this whole barrage of artificial chemicals comes at you. Phthalates, they're unstable molecules, and they're jumping off the surface into your nose, and that's why you smell them. So they're just they're found everywhere, including medical equipment, IV bottles, tubing. A whole subject of interest is like little premature babies who get, live their first months on IVs and what's going into them. Art supplies, and we're not even really so much here getting into industrial exposures, which is a whole other area. So these phthalates are ubiquitous. Shower curtains, nail polish, as I said, garden hoses, plastic containers, perfumes, personal care products, also in food. And it's interesting, they did, people who eat out have higher natural phthalate levels than people who cook at home. And you can try and live the most pristine life, and good luck, because you'll still have a lot of exposures. So it turns out, like when you eat out and you order chicken, the chicken is portioned out into a chicken portion, and in between is plastic, because that's how they know how much chicken to cook for you. So it's very sneaky. It's in ice cream, everywhere. And these phthalates we're going to put the BPA and phthalates together, are associated with decreased sperm count, miscarriage, premature birth, low birth weight, obesity, we're going to talk about in a little bit, ADHD, autism, cancers, early puberty. We all know girls are getting their period at 9 and 10 now because of the massive estrogen environment that they're exposed to, or at least one major contributor. And I just want to take a minute and stop. I can list all these things. I can say I was associated with this and associated with that, but you have to think of what this actually means to people's lives. I mean, something like hyperactivity disorder, all right, that doesn't sound like the worst, until you're called out of work into kindergarten because your kindergarten teacher your child won't sit in the seat. What does this do to you? What does this do to your work? What does this do to your other siblings, to their children? All these things, cancers, what does it do to you, to lost income, to your whole family? So all these things have just tremendous consequences for how we actually live our lives. So I think, we're very glib about listing things, but each one of these has a really striking human component. So I'm going to switch a little bit and talk about PFAS, because that is definitely something also very relevant to us in Wisconsin. And these are these per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances. They are not naturally occurring. And I'm going to say that these are definitely man-made. There's at least 12,000 of them, but we haven't even identified all the PFAS, because in the process of making them, you get byproducts that aren't even identifiable. So we know we're exposed to tons of chemicals, over like 300,000, but we don't even know what the chemicals actually are. PFAS there's a category of bioaccumulative and persistent, which means that they never go away and they add up. I was thinking about, as I was getting dressed, most of my clothing is going to be here in 1,000 years. To be honest, all these, at least half of it is synthetic. Maybe my boots are leather. Maybe that's a good, these things, it's like matter is neither created nor destroyed. These chemicals are created but never destroyed. So these are the known major PFAS sites in Wisconsin. And Dane County, you see, is a hot one right here. I guess some of you might have read about French Isle, which is near the La Crosse airport, where they were using firefighter foam, and then it got into the water supply of all the people on French Island, and they've been drinking bottled water, which we'll talk about in a little bit, since then. but there's other sites, mostly the product of either direct plastic industry or the paper industry. Plastic is a big deal in Wisconsin. We are number 8 in the country in plastic production, and we're only 20 in population. So 40,000 of us work in the plastic industry, so getting any kind of reform in regulation of plastic is an uphill battle in a lot of ways. We're exposed to many products that contain PFAS. PFAS is like the nonstick stuff, so like, you know, we all like going to REI and looking at all the cool, stuff, and all that stuff, A, is not going away, and B, much of it has PFAS. It's the nonstick thing. It's found like in pizza boxes, shiny lining, makes it grease-proof. Makeup, as we're gonna see in a minute, makeup is not regulated. We don't know what's in it. Microwave popcorn, firefighting foams, stain resistance, so armor guard and all that kind of stuff that you put on your couch or wherever you're putting it. Fast food packaging, dental floss. I think they've taken the out of the Glide, but Glide was a big one for the thing that made it so glidey was PFAS. But I don't know what they replaced it with, so. So these things are really ubiquitous. Nail polish. So how do we expose? We drink water, sometimes occupations, gets into fish. All this thing slides off and gets into the water supply that then gets into fish. We breathe air, we swallow dust and soil, et cetera, et cetera. And the EPA has a long list of things that are, so this is directly from the EPA website, so, or at least the EPA website that I last looked at. Yeah, it was on the EPA website, that we know. Okay, so, can lead to reproductive, decreased fertility, high blood pressure, developmental delays, cancers, including prostate, kidney, and testicular cancer, problems with the immune system. And this is big, because what this means is that vaccines, if we still have them, are not going to work as well. So interference with natural hormones and increased cholesterol. And so there's really, if you have high PFAS in your blood, we're not recommending testing, but if you do have high PFAS in your blood, there's no particular treatment. You can buy various kinds of water filters for your house, and in Madison, I think it's well 15, or one of the wells on the east side, they actually installed a very expensive filtration system for the water that comes from Starkweather Creek. And I will say, these filters capture the PFAS, but then the filters have the PFAS. So where does the filter go? It goes into the landfill, which is then sort of recycled. So we have like a PFAS karma. If you do buy a filter, look for certification. There are various good kinds of certifications. Okay, I'm just going to briefly talk about cosmetics, which is basically unregulated. And there's all sorts of things in modern day cosmetics. There's also very big racial disparities and socioeconomic disparities because poor people of color tend to use more products. It's a big issue. And let me just say right now, I am very moderate in my lifestyle. I use whatever I try and be somewhat mindful, but I'm a person of the modern age, so I don't obsess about putting on some blush or whatever. So I don't mean to say all these things to say that we should all be shakers or anything. I also want to say, we're talking about endocrine disruptors, and the Society of the Endocrine Society put out, and I always thought, I don't know if there's any endocrinologists in the room, but when I was in medical school, I always thought the endocrinologists were very sort of brainy, intellectual, nerdy, smart people, and they have put out a lot of information on endocrine disruptors, and they are very vehement in their advocacy for all of us. So there's lots of information you can get on the web. I'll talk a little bit about breastfeeding. I already mentioned that in animal models, it appears that breast cancer is sort of at least partially predetermined in fetal life, and there's some human evidence to support that. But there's also evidence that these chemicals disrupt breast formation in utero. So I was worried, as an obstetrician, I delivered lots of babies, like 10,000, I estimated. And I always wondered, why do we have all these lactation consultants? I mean, we've gone on for millennia without lactation consultants. We're mammals, we're supposed to lactate. So why do we need all this help? And it turns out that there's evidence in animal models that these chemicals interrupt the breast development so that the lobules and the connections are not properly formed. In utero, one of the PFASs are related to delayed breast development. In mice, it's related to delayed breast development. Also, breast milk is a conduit. It's full of chemicals. So most of these chemicals are stored in fat, and breast milk is very fatty. So the chemicals go through into the child through breastfeeding. So this is a list of some of the chemicals that go through. And for example, there was a relationship between the level of PFOA, which is one of the PFASs, in 6 to 8-year-old girls and the amount of time they were breastfed before. So again, the stuff is hard to get rid of, so it just stays, and it stays in our fat. This is a study in Norway, for every month of breastfeeding, there was a 3 to 6% increase in PFAS in the child. So this is very frightening stuff, and really people don't like to talk about this. I mean, who wants to talk about this? You know, Monsanto doesn't want to, and neither particularly does La Leche. A tough one. So there was a study that looked at the breast milk. So first-time mothers, nulliparous, had the most toxins in their breast milk. As you had more children, you sort of unloaded your toxins, and so the successive milk had less toxins because it was mobilized from the fat stores already. Sorry for all you firstborns. So the overall weight of the evidence still favors breast milk because truthfully we don't know what's in formula either. And breast milk still has like the magic, the immune magic, and lots of other magic, but this is quite worrisome. Okay guys, you're not off the hook at all. This is a graph of sperm counts in men. And in every westernized country, it has been decreasing dramatically. So when I was a resident in the infertility clinic, a normal sperm count was 300 million per cubic cc's. Those are the little guys, and they swim around. Now the average is like 150 million, by half. And this has been replicated over and over again. And it's really thought to be mediated by exposures to different kinds of solvents, to pesticides, paint materials, lead, radiation, X-rays. This is just for the Mayo Clinic. Phthalates, air pollution, BPA, all of these things are associated with decreased sperm counts. Also, there was a study showing that men who kept their cell phones in their hip pocket had lower sperm counts than men that kept it in their breast pocket. So usually around this time, everybody's like switching their cell phone. Okay, the environment and obesity. So we've been hearing a lot about obesity. 6 million kids are seriously overweight. What can we do? Here's a recent, this is like 2024, map of obesity in the United States. And as you can see, We are down there with the great ones like Alabama and Mississippi, and our neighbors to the west, Minnesota and Illinois, are a little bit less chubby than we are. So obesity is clearly an issue in Wisconsin. Causes myriad problems. And I will say our food industry is certainly not interested in our nutrition. You should just assume that. And if you're interested, Marion Nestle, who's she's not of the Nestle company, she's a famous scientist who studies nutrition, has a wonderful blog, it's free. So I would advise you, she talks about the food industry, and remember, the food industry is there to make money. They are not there to make you healthy. So this is what our typical supermarket kind of looks like. It's not about promoting healthy eating. But even with all that, there's still something else going on. So what they've discovered is that there are obesogens. And these are chemicals, endocrine disruptors in the environment that actually make us fat. And there's a lot of them. Phthalates, pesticides, BPA, PFAS, all the things we've been talking about. And they've even worked out the mechanism for this. It's very interesting. So what these things do is they interact with a receptor in our cell, PPA gamma, that's the name of the receptor. And this receptor tells the pre-fat cell to turn into a fat cell. And then it tells the fat cell, you're not fat, you don't have enough, store more, store more. So it's actually regulating our metabolism to make us fatter. So, we certainly should eat well, we certainly should eat healthy, but, the whole anti-obesity drugs are probably, counteracting this. I'm not sure that their mechanism is directly, the same as this, but there really are things in our environment that are promoting obesity, and therefore they're promoting diabetes and all the things that come with it. And finally, I'm going to take a couple of minutes to just talk about microplastics. Something came across, quadrillion, that we, every year, 600 quadrillion molecules of microplastics are released into the atmosphere. That is 1 billion million. I know, I couldn't get trying to get my mind around that number. And so what are microplastics? They're basically breakdowns of plastics. So the plastics degrade into microplastics that are less than 5 millimeters, and then they degrade into nanoplastics that are less than 1 millimeters. And they are found in every organ of our body. Brain, testicles, placenta, blood, you name it, and they're found in every organ. They come from many sources, and actually one of the sources of microplastics, I said that my clothes are going to be here forever. Every time you wash them, they shed. 30% of microplastics are from clothing. So every time you wash them, it sheds into the water that you wash, and then it sheds, and then it's recycled in the water cycle. We've had hell of a winter, and we're all wearing fuzzies, and those fuzzies are going to be around forever. And somebody said, well, you can recycle the fuzzies. Patagonia will take them back. But every time you recycle something, it makes an inferior, less stable product. So the product from recycled plastics or microplastics is not as stable not as good as the original product actually, and is more likely to shed microplastics when you wear them, when you just wear it, when you wash it, etc. I want to say, just draw your attention to one sort of thing that I'm interested in, which is artificial turf, which is plastic. And so our kids roll around it. They get little microabrasions because it hurts. There's more injuries the NFL actually is phasing out artificial turf. I don't know if the Super Bowl tonight is played on artificial turf or not, but there's only, I think, 6 teams left in the NFL that actually still have artificial turf. I think Lambeau is one of the original ones that kept the natural turf forever, which also probably has chemicals, but different thing. But I am really concerned about the ubiquitousness of artificial turf. I mean, not only me, a lot of people are concerned, and the potential not only injuries, but exposures to endocrine disruptors. And when it breaks down, the rain comes, goes into our sewers, into our water supply, and again, we have like plastic karma being recycled. So just a few things, I'm not going to dwell on this, but a few things I want to mention about microplastics. They're very difficult to measure, and there's a lot of, this is very young science, and there's a lot of controversy about what you're measuring, and are they measuring artifact, dust, artifact in their lab, et cetera. 2, found in every organ. We talked about that: lungs, breast milk, liver, spleen, placenta, testes, everything. And the health effects are just starting to be known. So, for example, they looked at people who have clots in the carotid artery right here. And if you have microplastic in your clots, you have more mortality in the next 3 years than if you don't. So that's you already have the clot, but do you have microplastic or not? And these microplastics are like, they give off, not only they physically block things, they elute the chemical. So whatever's in them, it's like a reservoir, and they just are leaching out this chemical. So it's like a double whammy, physical thing, and then as a hormonal sort of pump. They find more microplastics in people who have dementia. So this is really an ongoing story, and stay tuned. And I want to mention one more thing about these hormones in general, these hormonal disruptors, because one of the things that you hear, I'm going to sort of be a little bit political and cynical, but you hear industry says several things. They say the research isn't there for all these things. And a lot of times the research is there. 2, they say it's a small dose, but we regulate things like PFAS for 4 parts per trillion. That is 1 drop in 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So when they say it's a small dose, yeah, small dose, but these do big things. Every morning I take a teeny thyroid pill. It's amazing. So, there are certain things to watch for. The research isn't there, just a little, et cetera. And, we see that with lead, as I showed you. So, okay, how are we protected against these harmful exposures? Well, one thing is we know almost nothing about anything. It's, there's so many of them, hundreds of thousands, and we're able to study this little tip of the iceberg. So in 1976, Gerald Ford signed the Toxic Substances Control Act. That's called TSCA. And can you imagine now? I'll leave that too. Who started the EPA, by the way? Nixon, right, 1970. So in 1976, Gerald Ford signed TSCA, and that was, so that was the first time things were really regulated. 60,000 chemicals were already grandfathered in. And then in that TSCA, you had to, the chemicals came in the market, and then there had to be a complaint, and then it was studied. Unlike drugs who went through, in vitro and in vivo trials, et cetera, chemicals were just put on the market, and then if somebody had a suspicion, it was studied. So this wasn't so great. And also, that's when it was signed, and you can see the chemical production afterwards zoomed. Really, it started zooming after World War II, and then it just zoomed. So then Ronald Reagan in '81 was very helpful, and he said, well, it's really too expensive to control these things. And so you had to put sort of an economic justification in. So, you can't regulate something if it costs too much, essentially. So then in 1976, they revised it. And Obama signed the Frank Lautenberg Chemical Safety Act for the 21st century. And nobody was happy with this, industry or environmental and conservation people, so it did something. But it has all sorts of problems. It did some things, but if you look at it, for existing chemicals, by 3.5 years, there had to be 20 assessments of 20 chemicals. That's nothing. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of chemicals. 20 is nothing. And then it could take up to 9 years to determine if there's a risk. For new chemicals, the EPA has 90 days to make a decision on whether to study this. So in the absence of evidence, the decision is usually, yeah, go ahead, because 90 days isn't very long. The funding is much more than $25 million now. It did take away the economic burden clause, and it also said states can't have stricter limits on chemicals than the EPA does. One of the biggest there's all sorts of weaknesses, but it's very clearly defines how to test a chemical. So we talked about BPA before, and we talked about dermal absorption. In the protocol, BPA is pumped into the stomach of animals. So it completely bypasses the whole eating and chewing thing and dermal absorption. So a lot of the methodology, in order to get the methodology standard, it sort of takes away the ecological part of it, which is how are you actually exposed. So lots of problems with it, and we're exposed through many pathways. The methodology is problematic, and mostly it doesn't study like all the other chemicals, like how does everything interact with everything else. We have no idea, because it's that one at a time thing that we talked about before. To date, 26 chemicals have not proceeded to market. It's nothing. And there's actually, on the EPA website, is this timeline of taxa, of like what's happened with TSCA, and it is painful. It's like, and a year later, this committee met to decide this, and then another year later, this. I mean, it's all like this administrative stuff. It actually has very little to do with actually any evaluation, or certainly no protection of any of us or our children. So, what are we going to do? First thing is to think about the precautionary principle. And what this basically says, and this is what they use in Europe. The EU is much more proactive than we are. And basically their approach is, if this is looking dangerous, let's hold off. And so, we're like Missouri, the show me state. We're like scientists, and everything has to be at the P less than 0.05 level, and repeated. And they're like, no, let's just hold off until we get better data. So that's one thing. I mean, it's almost like you want to make your standards fit the possible consequences. And if the possible consequences are cancer and autism and all these other things we're talking about, maybe you want to be a little conservative and say, no, this doesn't look good. There's lots and lots of practical advice, and I have slides and slides of, avoid microwaving in plastic and plastic containers and all the things. And just Susan R. Davidson at Gmail, I'll send you the list. You can get these readily online, and I have many, many of these. We'll just skip them. I want to draw your attention to this. This is, if any of you don't know about the Environmental Working Group, they have a lot of information on toxins. Their website is a total pain in the neck because there's a lot of firewalls. Give a contribution. Eventually you can get what you want without giving a contribution, but you have to go through a lot of thises and that's. But every year they put out a list of the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. And there's studies showing, they actually took grade school kids and substituted their diet with organic, and actually looked at the pesticides in the urine, and I took out that slide, but you could actually see the difference in pesticides. You don't want this to be a social class thing. You want people to eat healthy food. That's number one, is eating healthy food. But the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen are helpful because if you're going to spend money on organic food, it tells you which ones are worthwhile. So basically things with thin skins are mostly in the dirty dozen. And then spinach, strawberries are always, and grapes are always and apples are always in the dirty dozen. And then the clean 15, you can see something, interesting ones like carrots and mushrooms are in the clean 15, not so important to buy them organic. So you can get that online once you go through all their firewalls. Okay, policy and enforcement really matter. And those of us, we were at Jonathan's talk a few months ago on climate change, and one of the points he makes is that really there's just so much each of us can do, and it's not our fault. We have to make big changes, and in order to really tackle this, we really have to have changes in policy nationally and internationally. So, I've given you all these individual things to do, but it's really not, you can do everything on all of these lists, and you will still test positive for many, many chemicals. So we really have to look at this in a larger way. So this is childhood blood levels over time. And you can see them dropping in the 1990s. What happens in the 1990s? Gas. They took the lead out of gasoline. So most exposures now are from paint and other things. There's other exposures too, but policy really makes a huge difference. This is a picture of a mother of one of my patients. The patient was hospitalized on bed rest for an obstetrical complication, and the mom had an artificial limb, and the mom was hanging out with her like day after day. So one day he said to her, "Tell me what happened to your arm." And she told me that she was given her doctor. She grew up in East St. Louis. She was living in East St. Louis, and her doctor went to a conference in Canada and came back with samples of thalidomide. And so she was given thalidomide for nausea and vomiting early in pregnancy. And remember back on that slide, limbs were right in the area where the sensitivity to thalidomide, where people have nausea and vomiting in that first trimester. Thalidomide was freely given in Canada, in Germany, in lots of westernized countries. So a chemist at the FDA named Francis Kelsey looked at the data and said, "This does not look right. These studies do not look good," and banned thalidomide from coming into the United States. Interesting thing about Francis Kelsey. So she was a chemist at the University of Chicago, and she applied for this job at the FDA, and they thought she was a man, Francis. And so when she showed up, they were like, didn't know what to do. They really didn't. So anyway, she was a hero. Okay, so now practical things. The reform movement is committed to protecting the environment and ensuring a just, healthy, and safe future for generations to come. And this is from the Reform website. So how are we going to do this? Number one, I don't know why that says, but anyway, we have the Temple Bethel Environment and Climate Change Action Team. And would the members please stand up who are here? So they brought you solar on the roof. I joined later. But if you're interested in being an activist, we have an easy way to do it. Just join us. We meet by Zoom once a month. We're having an event in April, a tour of the Madison sewage plant. And this should be much more interesting to you at this point than it would have been earlier. So please join us for this tour of the sewage plant. It is, Marta, when is it? April 12th, I think you told me. But look for it in the news. So please join us, and join us in general. We need more. We need ideas. We need energy. We need commitment. There's still lots of room to move, but it's going to take some work. I mean, it might mean not using plastic and washing dishes. How are we going to do that? All of it takes commitment on all of us. So hopefully, as a congregation, this is something we're interested in. Look for ways to get involved. And this is from the Wisconsin Conservation Voices and Voters. And they have a great lobby day. If you want to know how to do statewide work, and I do a lot of statewide work, this is a good state to do it in. We have certain things that we can build on. It's a small state. We can really make a difference here in our state. So look at their website, both for information and when their next lobby day is. When you go to these lobby days, they spend the morning teaching you what to ask for and how to ask for it and why you're asking for it. And then they make the appointments and you go as like a contingent to meet with your representative. So it's a great way to get educated on how to lobby and what to be interested in. So this is the last one, but watch the website for new ideas. I'm part of this group, and I didn't mention this. So all these things I was talking about, getting interested in this issue, was around 2010. And I went to this conference at the university called on the environment and on health and the environment. And I was blew my mind. It was so interesting, and I was already thinking about this gastroschisis stuff. And so I was so interested in it, and I happened to sit with people from the University of California in San Francisco, and they have a very good program on reproductive health and the environment, and a very good website if you're interested. And I'm sitting with them, and they look at me and they go, you have an MD, you have interest, get out there, educate yourself, and get out there and talk, because lobbyists have no degrees, and people listen to them. So I have no background in this. I was a psychology major. I went to graduate school in psychology, then I went to medical school. But I learned, and you can learn too, and you can be a big mouth. It really pays off. So I joined that group that sponsored that conference. Right then and there, I've been on the steering committee of the Wisconsin Environmental Health Network since 2011, and we put on a conference every year on the environment and health. And this year it is the evening of March 5th and the afternoon of March 6th. And we have fabulous speakers. John is actually going to talk on climate change and health. Bruce Lamphere is going to talk on toxins. And the Thursday night one is on fluoride, which if you've been reading the paper is a very hot issue, which we can discuss a whole other time. And then Dr. Todd Jemison is going to talk on cosmetics, and especially in Black populations, but for all of us. This conference, it's in the Arboretum. It's going to be beautiful. It's open to the public. The night before is free, and then the next day I think it's $25 for the public. But I encourage you to come. I guarantee it'll be interesting to you. The other thing I want to call out is in the last year or two, we started, a retired architect started a group, Beyond Plastics Madison. Beyond Plastics is a national group dealing with plastic pollution. They're incredible. They're really good. Their website is terrific. And we have a Madison chapter, and this meeting passed, but just go on our website, Beyond Plastics Madison, and get involved. As I said, plastics is a big issue. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but we have something called the Plastic Bag Preemption Law, which means that if Madison wanted to get rid of single-use plastic bags or plastic cups, we cannot. It's illegal. And it says, and so what happened in just recently, 2016, under the Walker administration, Eau Claire and La Crosse wanted to do a plastic bag ban or a plastic cup ban, some ban. And Walker got everybody together, and very quickly they passed this law that you cannot ban specific containers. So that means so that's definitely on the agenda for Beyond Plastics Wisconsin, and Beyond Plastics in general. And the other thing Beyond Plastics is interested in is something called the extender producer liability, which is that if you make a mess, you clean it up. So what companies do is they go, oh, I'll put a recycling plant in your city. You know, they sell like a ton of bottled water and stuff. And then they give you some money, but then you're responsible for the rest of it, for ongoing. Oh, and I want to say 1 liter of bottled water, 250,000 to 500,000 microplastics. So those people on French Island have been drinking bottled water forever. I mean, this is not friendly, you know, it's like one pick your poison kind of thing. But anyway, join us at Beyond Plastics. And finally, this is just because I happen to have the floor, so I'm going to call this out. I'm president of the board of a not-for-profit environmental law group, and we have in our children's trust case going on, and you might want to follow this. It's super interesting. We have 15 plaintiffs who are between the ages of 7 and 17, and some of them are Native American, and their traditions are being, they can't do them. Some of them have asthma. One of them had to move because there was a landslide near her house, and it caused a lot of anxiety. Somebody else is a farm family, and their farm is not doing well because the climate is unstable. And so they have filed a suit against the Public Service Commission, the PSC, and the legislature, Wisconsin legislature, because the legislature passed a law that the PSC cannot consider air pollution or climate change when they issue a permit for a power plant. Yeah, it's outrageous. So they're saying that under the Wisconsin Constitution, they are entitled to life and they are entitled to happiness. That's in the Constitution. And that this and also the public trust doctrine says that they're entitled to clean water. So keep an eye on that. It's called Dunn versus the PSC, and just keep an eye on it. So our conclusion, what time is it? Okay, we're good. I think we're okay? You got the conclusion. but I want to say thank you, and this is like the Native American La Dor Verdor, society grows when old men plant trees, the shades of which under which they will never sit. So thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Susan. Thanks for being a member of here and for everything. This is a beautiful sentiment. Certainly reminds me of the story of Honi in the Talmud that some of you know, that talks about 70 years before a tree will bear fruit, yet we plant them anyways. At 11:45, you will hear mass chaos, which means we are going to have to end. But it does give us about 10 minutes for questions with Dr. Davidson. I will ask you to be brief so we can hear from her as much as possible. I'll walk the microphone around, but thank you so much for being here and for adding. And I did look it up. April 10th is the TO, the trip with the ECAT team. All of that information to the wastewater treatment plant. All of that was being led by a Bethel member, Marty Griffin, and all of that will be on the TBE webpage. So we'll do some quick questions.
Thank you, Susan. So using the pods for either washing clothes or in the dishwasher, I read somewhere recently that they have a plastic coating that dissolves, and so not only does the coating stuff go in the water, but that you can actually end up with byproducts on your dishes, which you're then going to eat off of, and on your clothes, which you're going to wear. Can you comment on that?
No, well said, thank you.
That was a statement, but we'll take it, so, all right.
I don't know.
Costco now sell their arm land without
We have a question over here.
Liz is just answering the question from the pods.
There are pods that don't have plastic in them, made by drops, and so they have a silicone coating.
We only have
Okay.
12 minutes with Dr. Davis.
I do want to say, Liz is like really careful about researching products and things, so she could be a great resource for all of us. Okay.
Are there tests that we should be asking our doctors for ourselves and for our kids, similar to lead where it's good to know as a baseline?
That is really interesting, and it's a good question. So the question is, should we be testing? What else should we be testing for? For a while, they were toying with making phthalates something to test for, and that's sort of gone nowhere. So the answer right now is probably no. There isn't, you know. I would test for lead, and it used to be just in children receiving medical assistance, but everybody has secret sources of lead in your beautiful home and things like that, so I would test for lead. And actually, only 60% of kids are actually tested or less, even in the Medicaid population.
How far along is that litigation in that you were just talking about? Just starting? Has it been going on?
It's just starting. So right now, and it's really so the state. So we're working against the state right now. So they're saying that our young people don't have standing, that they don't have the right to litigate. It doesn't affect them. And they've tried that in other states. I mean, Montana and Hawaii won these kinds of cases. So the Wisconsin Environmental Health Network that I'm part of wrote a letter saying yes, and with a lot of help from Jonathan, saying yes, they do have standing. So we're waiting. So stay tuned because we're waiting for the results to see if it's going to go ahead. I imagine it will, but who knows?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to mention there's a national umbrella organization, Fibershed, that's trying to reclaim local and sustainable, that biodegrade fabrics. And there's a group in our neighborhood called Heartland Threads. You could look at. They're getting going started through Soil Sisters.
Dr. Davidson, is there anything do you feel that is Jewish about the work that you do?
Oh, everything.
Can you
I mean, if it's like, if you're not doing, we're really responsible for each other, for our children, for other people, for everybody. So I consider this a very Jewish way to be. I mean, Tikkun Olam, heal the world. I mean, we're really talking about the world, the earth. So, I'd be interesting, Rabbi, if sometime you want to lead a discussion on sort of the Jewish roots of environmentalism. But I feel, personally, I feel this is my expression of my Jewish nature.
Wonderful talk, but the other big association with extreme environmental stress is poverty and race. And we had a child who had severe neurologic complications and status from lead intoxication because they were living in such a poor environment with lead intoxication. And the interesting thing is that most of the pediatricians didn't initially even recognize that that was the problem because they don't see it. But it's still out there.
Oh, absolutely. And I want to say, another preemption law is, especially in Milwaukee, you can't require rental properties to be lead-free. It's in the state law.
Susan, thank you so much. This was really terrific and important. This is clearly a global issue. Many of the things that need to be done are local. For the greenhouse gases, the United States is a worst offender. I suspect it's the same with plasticizing and these others. Could you put that into perspective? How good a job is the United States doing compared to the rest of the world as far as this contamination and problems for worldwide health?
Yeah, I can't speak from great knowledge in this. I will tell you, though, just in general, I mean, you go to a store in France and buy a baguette, and they hand you a baguette. It's not in a plastic wrapping, then they give to you in a plastic bag. So I think the culture here is very, a lot of places takeout is not a thing. You go to a restaurant, you eat. you buy a cup of coffee, you stand at the bar, you drink it, you put it down. So this is a very, I think, a very cultural thing in this sort of fast everything culture. But Paul, it's a great question. I don't know the answer.
Maybe time for one more question.
Okay. So the thing that struck me as you were talking is I felt really overwhelmed by all of the different ways that the toxins, pollutants, and things kind of invade our environment. And I remember feeling this way like 10 years ago or so, and like looking at all these ingredients and then just getting overwhelmed. And like, I guess, what would be your advice for somebody walking home today? Like, what is one thing they can do, or something that can help them, start to notice or pay attention to be able to change some of the things in their environment, knowing they can't do everything, but what's like one or two things they could do today or this week to notice and try to pay more attention to that or alter what they're doing in their home?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking it. And it is overwhelming. And that's why I said I'm sort of moderate on things, because otherwise you could, there's, a condition called eco-anxiety, and you don't, that's not going to help us. So what I would say is several things. One is we do different things at different parts of our lives. So in terms of activism, I started doing this kind of work the last 10 years or 15 years of my career, and then when I retired, I moved out, just sort of lateraled. But when I was having little kids and working, and this and that, you just, that's not the time of your life when you're gonna, be out knocking on doors and things. So, whatever you can do, whenever you can do it, just a little. And, whatever little thing you could do, that's better than nothing in terms of activism. And in terms of personal life, some simple things like the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15, reducing plastic use, being aware. And a lot of this is just awareness. I think part of the reason we're all together is to raise our awareness so that when we read the newspaper, we understand things better, when we understand the issues, and we can, vote intelligently and ask our elected officials to do things like repeal the plastic preemption law. Part of it is just awareness. So whatever, cut down on plastic use, try and store things in metal or glass, things like that for you and your family directly. And whatever, there's other parts of your life we can do more. And these practical things, if you want, I can send you my slides, or there's a ton of information on the internet on health promoting behaviors.
Thank you, Dr. Davidson.
Thank you.
Thanks so much to Monica and Paul from JSS. It's been great to be with everyone this morning. It will be very crowded out there, so just please, there's going to be lots of kids running around, so just please, as if you walk out, just know that there's going to be people zipping, think they're trying to score a touchdown. So.
Dr. Davidson, I would love
Let me grab this for you.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
You're wired.